This is the Leadership Podcast, and we study leaders. This is episode 156, featuring Abigail Manning, entrepreneur, CEO, and awareness creator on authentic health.
Welcome to the Leadership Podcast. Jim and Jan interview leaders who are blazing new trails. They'll read the bestsellers, they study trends, they'll provide thought leadership and the latest research when it comes to inspiring and leading others. They'll get you access to the great leaders of our time and help you learn from the very best. Now your hosts, Jim Vaselopulous and Jan Rutherford.
Thank you for joining us today. This is Jim Vaselopulous, founder of Rafty Advisors, and this is the Leadership Podcast.
And this is Jan Rutherford, author and founder of Self-Reliant Leadership. Thanks for making us a part of your day as we study leaders. We encourage you to share this show with a friend and sign up for our mailing list at theleadershippodcast.com. If you do that, you get access to all our show notes and special offers.
So today we welcome a very special guest, Abigail Manning, and she's special because Abigail and I go way back, grade school back. So
Wow.
We knew each other from the grade school days, and just have reconnected in recent years. And I think we reconnected on social media via Facebook, and we caught up, and Abigail had listened to the podcast and said, wow, I really, want to talk. And we've struck up some conversations and a friendship that was dormant for many years. So, and she's doing some amazing things, which is what we're going to get into today. But she's, done a lot of great things as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and now she's talking about some neat stuff we're going to get into about, authentic health. So, Abigail, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm wonderful. So excited that we reconnected.
Absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about who you really are. We can tell you, she's run a company, she's done this, she's done that. Who are you really? What is the stuff we need to know?
First and foremost, my biggest pride and joy is that I'm a mom. I dedicated raising my kids. I raised them since they were 5 and 2 by myself. They're now 22 and 19. I'm really proud of my kids and the family that we built and created. I am an entrepreneur. This is my second company that I have. And I'm hopefully someone who champions for other people and makes a positive difference in the world by making information that was kind of scary seem very approachable. And I don't know. You're probably going to find out more as you ask me more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know you've had your, the traditional kind of business career, and now in this business, you're focused on a lot of awareness about some really important issues. And I know you're a passionate proponent of creating awareness around different types of abuse. And so without getting too detailed into, the reasons why this is important to you, but a little bit of that's probably necessary. What made you as a leader want to go beyond kind of your personal situation to help others with theirs?
Oh, sure. I've always been kind of a mission-driven person, I guess. I like setting a goal and going after it. I'm one of those people that I'm a runner, and if you say we're going to run a 10K, I don't stop 100 feet before it. I have to run the full 10K, even if it's just a training run. So having a mission, to me, I came from childhood abuse by both my parents, and then later in life, because I didn't understand abuse and the cycles and the codes and everything like that, I found myself in domestic violence. Right after that, in post-traumatic stress. And I realized if I didn't figure this out, it was going to end up killing me. And I had 2 little kids watching me, and I knew there had to be a way. So some of the things about my personality, as you were asking earlier, are also my strongest survival skills. I would say one is I'm optimistic. I'm one of those people that's a cheerleader of you can do it, and come on, let's go, and rally the troops. I'm also a creative thinker and problem solver. I kind of have that overdrive of thinking of, if there's a problem and we can't figure it out, I know there's 3 solutions. There's always 3 solutions to every problem, even if it looks desperate at the time. And maybe the most important part of my personality is the protector part. Even when I was a little girl, I remember being 8 years old and standing in front of my bedroom mirror, and I took a vow that the abuse ends with me. And I have a very strong, not on my watch. So I raised my kids that way, the go fight win. Of course we can do this, not a problem. Ran my other company. And now that they're both off and living their own adult lives, I found I needed another mission. And so I said, okay, I guess that little 8-year-old girl is going to stand up to the microphone, and we're going to start a company out of this, and we're going to launch a way to protect other people and explain it, because I took all this time and energy figuring it out, and I want to be able to share that with other people so that they don't have to spend as many years as I did trying to figure it all out.
Well, I'm so very proud of you. And one of the things I find so amazing is when we reconnected after so many years and you kind of confided in me about some of the issues you had faced, I couldn't believe it, because who I knew, as a young woman, as a young girl from those days, was like, I never would have known. And so the kind of inner strength that you have is impressive. It's just it makes me just have so much respect for you and what you've done. But you internally had like this strength from a young age, and you knew it. How do you help people develop that same type of inner strength to really say, because not everyone has that fortitude that I think you knew you had at a young age.
Right. And I would say, so thank you. I would say, find what you're good at and hold on to that. So I was always athletic. And so it just came naturally to me in so many different ways. So I kind of held on to that, and I listened to the people who were feeding me positive things, who would hug me when they saw me. I looked for role models and mentors. I looked for people that I admired. I read books. I loved all the movies and stories I could find on Helen Keller and Anne Frank and, inspirational people that a lot of us go to, Martin Luther King. But just even in my own neck of the woods, my own gymnastic coach, Tony Calabrese, you might remember
him. Yeah.
And, he was one of these guys, when he turned 50, he jogged 50 miles in the snow with a 50-pound backpack. No kidding. And just their perspectives on life. And I think it really helped me. And we have to make a choice if we're going to look at the optimism. Life has not been easy, but it's not. Also, it's how you look at it. So I choose to look for the hope. I choose to look for optimism. I choose to see the connection in other people. And I think one of the things that is good about my personality, and it also held me back for a long time, is I'm quick to protect other people. I'm quick to watch out for other people. And how can I make this a better world? And so for so long I was doing that. And then when my kids left, the house got very, very quiet. And I didn't have that run out, help them with all their activities and support them and encourage them and everything. So I had to do a lot of more internal look. And I think that's important if we could break that down and start teaching kids and start doing it in our workplaces at an earlier age, so it doesn't pile up. It's like not cleaning your house, but once every 10 years. Mm-hmm. What a mess. And so I think that's what people can do, is they can start looking around for inspiration. They can focus on optimism, focus on what they can control, and look to people who can give you a helping hand.
Yeah. And we could make a whole show out of, navigating through the empty nest thing. But
oh yeah,
and maybe we should. But Abigail, yeah. Oh, I know. How do we recognize someone who may be suffering from abuse, either at home or work, and what's the best way to support them, knowing that what if we make assumptions that somebody's suffering and they're not, or we are? I mean, what's I guess the question is, how do we recognize it? How do we check our assumptions? How do we not be in the way and tread on areas we shouldn't? And what's the best way to support them? I know that's a jumble.
Lovely. No. It's a lovely jumble. It's a good jumbo soup. I like it. It's got a lot of spice in it.
Guacamole.
So I would say, first of all, you are not going to be able to recognize it. Let's just start with that. And here's why. Because people think it's only happens in that part of town, to those type of people, that lack of education, that socioeconomic background. And it doesn't. we're not any one shape, color, size, gender area. It happens across all demographics. And so that's number one. I hear so many people saying, well, it wouldn't happen in my community. It doesn't happen in my office. And yes, it does. So if we can get past that assumption, as you asked about what assumptions can we look past, that it doesn't happen in your neck of the woods, because it sure is happening there for sure. And then what does it look like? Well, some people can play small and quiet, and some people are overtly loud and energetic and steal the attention. So I think that because the spectrum happens on such a different level, it can be from subtle to severe, and it can be tons and tons and tons of subtle forms of abuse, where it's bullying, and it's not that bullying isn't a severe at times when it is, but some people will say like it starts small and then it grows big. So looking for what I would say is repeated mistreatment. So when you see someone who, if you watch and you're like, let's say in the office environment, or on a team or in an organization, and you see someone continuously having repeated mistreatment, that is the number one way of recognizing abuse.
Is what?
Is that it's repeated mistreatment to them. So
But-
it's not, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you say we can't see it, how do we see that?
So you see how other people are behaving to them. Good question. Thanks for clarifying. So how other people are behaving to them, or how they're treating themselves. So is it judgment? Is it shame? Is it blame? Is it negative language? Is it a continuous cycle? And it can bounce between the 5 big forms of abuse, from emotional, verbal, physical, sexual, and financial. It's not always the same. So some people will say, I've had people say to me, well, I really wasn't abused by my spouse because I wasn't sexually abused. He just hit me. So being able to understand what abuse is, and that it doesn't have to be this huge trauma.
Yeah, and gosh, this is really fascinating. The you mentioned self-blame, and one of the behavioral analysis tools we use shows self-blame, and the analysis in it, when somebody was super high self-blame, it basically said, warning, they need professional help. They took that off because it, misinterpreted it, but you can imagine misinterpreted, but it remains that the psychologists that created this tool have said, of all the things that we're measuring, when you see self-blame, danger. I mean, can you say more about that?
Sure. Well, self-blame. So what happens is abuse happens. So my definition is repeated mistreatment, where one person uses manipulations to gain and maintain power and control over another person. So self-blame, what a manipulator does, and this is, so when you break it down, manipulations are one of the things you want to watch for. And that's where someone tries to use the shame, the blame, and the isolation. So someone doesn't believe themselves. They actually think they're dumb. They actually think they're stupid. They actually think they're unworthy. And it goes on for so long, they get so brainwashed. That's why when people say, well, why didn't they leave? It's because they truly believed that they couldn't make it on their own. They truly believed they were at fault. Well, you're right. That person came home and they were tired, and I didn't have dinner quite ready yet. If you're looking like, for example, domestic violence. And then they start believing the self-blame and that they are at fault. And so then it becomes this kind of dark hole that you can't seem to see the light. And that's why it's important for people on the outside to be able to ask non-judgmental questions. So I hear so many times where people are like, well, you should just leave. So that just adds to more of their shame and blame. That adds more to their self-doubt and their self-judgment and their, well, gosh, now I confided in my close friend and she thinks I'm stupid too.
Yeah. And you mentioned, that's really interesting. You mentioned financial, and I think I know what that means, but I don't want to assume.
So there's financial is a huge portion of it. So a lot of the times, the huge majority, it's over 90% of people going through domestic violence, they use financial as a weapon. So let's say you're getting divorced, and let's say the wife, because it happens back and forth, right? It's not like just one demographic is more abusive than another. So let's say the wife is using money as a financial tool. So she's the breadwinner. He was the stay-at-home dad. She says, I'm the one who has the lawyer. You'll never see your kids. I'll never pay you alimony, those types of things. during
Wow.
a relationship. A boss can say the same things too. Hey, if you want that raise, you're going to do what I need.
Yeah. Interesting.
So financial is used a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting. This show won't air for a few months, but it is March 8th. It is International Women's Day. Just so happened.
Yeah.
So interesting. But yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Very interesting.
Sure. So it's looking for just those negative self-beliefs and limiting statements.
So while we in the workplace might not be aware of something that's happening at home, if someone has a propensity to, if they're accepting that role at home, should we then maybe see that maybe they're accepting that role at work, where is that like the pattern we could look at and maybe be a little more sensitive to, that says if someone's getting taken advantage of at home, it's likely they have a mindset where they're getting taken advantage of at work? Is that like is work the safe place where people are, where they maybe might operate normally?
Great question. And this is why it is a tricky topic, right? So some people, we all wear different masks, but underneath that mask is the same person. So if you're having something happening at work that is impacting you, it is going to impact your home life and vice versa. So some people do go to work as an escape. That's where, for example, overachievers. You achieve so you can prove to yourself you're not what they're saying back at home. So you may look like a very different person in the work world than you do to your neighbors, to your family, to your spouse back at home, where you could have a totally different mask on and be a totally different person. So I honestly like just I talk about healthy boundary lines, and I talk about them being direct, firm, and kind. So I try not to, when I see someone struggling, I don't say, are you okay? Because the first answer, of course, here, especially if you talk to someone like me, an optimist, of course I am, right? Are you good? I mean, like if you ask them, are you good? They say, yes, I am. But if you look at them and you've built trust and you've built some rapport with them and you ask it with sincerity and you say, are you okay? And that changes the conversation just slightly. And I think that's the big key, isn't it, Jim, is to having that authenticity of, I care about you. I truly care about you and how you're doing. Is everything okay at home? Is everything okay at work? Is there anything I can do to make this a better office environment for you? No one is going to open that door if they feel self-doubt and self-blame and judged and criticized. They are not going to allow somebody in unless they really trust them. The hard thing about abuse is that it's such a violation of trust. The person you're supposed to be able to trust the most is the one who has done something to manipulate or abuse you. So not only do you have a harder time trusting other people until you do your hard work, but you also have a hard time trusting yourself. So if my boss came in and asked me, is everything okay with your home life? If I don't have a great trusting relationship with someone who controls if I get the raise or not, I might not tell them. But if they're more like, hey, we have some special services, or they leave information out in the coffee room, and I build that relationship where I feel like I can trust them and I think that they really truly care, then you've opened the possibility for them to be authentic.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I love about kind of the dialogue we're having today, because if you think about it, how many times have trust and relationships come up in the context of leadership? And really to kind of help people and to lead people and help people through not just, some business objective, but through life as friends, as in being a leader in your community, being a leader as maybe the coach of a sports team or something like that. It all really comes down to trust and, having trusting relationships, and which is why I think, this is so important. It's so encouraging. And your optimism is infectious. I really like that about you. But I wanted to probe a little deeper on one thing, because it seems like today everyone's like down on everything. It's like, oh my gosh, it's never been this bad. It's never been this bad, and the reality is poverty is probably at its best, situation in many, many decades. So many things are so much better, but there's such a strong belief. And, people even say like bullying is worse than it's ever been. And maybe with cyberbullying, I don't know, but I don't know if bullying is worse than it's ever been, or if it's just that we're more aware of this. And how does that awareness it clearly affects our confidence, because if you look at the data on crime and so many other things, it seems like things are getting better generically, but the awareness maybe saps our confidence. How do you see that kind of balance as you kind of help people in our society struggle with the confidence to overcome, terrible situations?
Sure. And I think that, so I'm going to go back to optimism, that I think people can look at the world falling apart and we're so separated from one another. I don't see that. I see the world coming together. I've had amazing people such as yourselves reach out to me and say, I want to have this. I've had two famous authors actually reach out to me. One called me, Simon Sinek, of encouragement, which is unheard of and amazing.
That's awesome.
I've had, fantastic. Like, talk about someone who actually does what they say they're going to do, right? People are so quick to say they're not authentic, they're not sincere. Unfortunately, I actually kind of questioned his sincerity on the call. I was like, well, I hope you're sincere, because it's a really good message. And it is. And I've had other people reach out. I mean, I'm working right now with so many different national level people, from federal bureaus of family and youth services to TSA to that just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen as quickly as I started this company 2 years ago. And it's because the world wants to be healed. They want to be happy. They want to help one another. It's just fear talking, and fear can take over. So I would say focus on the optimism, focus on what you can control, learn what you can do, be part of the cure.
Yeah, I love that. And so let's say, when you get invited in to talk to a group, and I know you've been doing a lot of speaking engagements, and I'm really proud of you. People are like, hey, we're inviting you in because we want to be healed. We want this and we're ready for this. But a lot of times if you're a leader and you're in an organization and people may not be ready, but you want to exert, let's say, a new viewpoint on them. Do you have any ideas or tips on how, you can help calm the fears and the frustration? Because sometimes, is it just enough for the leader to be optimistic and buoyant, or is it, are there things that would help people calm their fears and frustrations so they can have a more open mind?
Sure. I personally think it's just like what I was saying, HBL, so that you're firm, you're direct, and you're kind. So you break the language down. You talk in the language that people can understand. So if someone's in a crisis mode, I'm not talking about your emotional intelligence, right? I'm not going to use buzzwords. I'm not going to use cognitive behavioral theory language on you. That doesn't help anybody, right? So you break it down. So if a leader, for example, trust is a great word. And I try to break it down to say, well, trust, how you build trust. Here's how you build trust. It's an acronym. So TRUST, truth, respect, unity, safety, transparency. So what does it mean to be transparent, right? It means, are you okay? Not really. Thank you for asking. It doesn't mean I have to rush in and fix you. It doesn't mean you have to tell me everything that's going on, but it's not faking it. It's not lying about it. It's not pretending that everything is fine when it's not. So if we can break language down into actionable steps, that's kind of like a checklist. So one of the things I do is I talk about unhealthy versus healthy behavior. And so I literally have a chart, and on the left is unhealthy and on the right is healthy. So when people, it's really, manipulators can spin things around so quickly. And if you have self-doubt, it's so easy to get upside down and backwards. But if you look at the checklist and you make it simple, like, is this person confusing and changing expectations? And I love explaining that, like moving the goalposts, right? They're moving the goalposts. You're like, wait a minute, I thought that was a score. Versus, is this person clear and calm and consistent? So you're looking for repeated behavior, kind of like when we started the conversation with that repeated mistreatment. You're looking for the repeated behavior. And one of the best ways to keep it as simple as possible is to understand when someone's being a manipulator or abusive or unhealthy is, do their actions match their words? Yep.
Abigail, shifting gears a little bit. So thinking about the work environment. And, especially these days, there's a lot of people that are stepping forward saying, hey, this has happened to me. I shouldn't have to tolerate it. And this is a little sticky, delicate question. What do people have a responsibility for? If at the outset of abuse or during it, what's the personal responsibility of people, not just those that might be more assertive, aggressive, abusive. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. And if I'm not answering the question, then you can say that's not the question I asked, and we'll have another go at it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So personal responsibility is a huge, huge love of mine. Self-ownership. So there's 3 steps in what I take people through. And again, I try to break it down so it's easy. It's enlighten, so that you're aware of how your life experiences have impacted and affected what you call as normal. Because your normal isn't the same as, your neighbor's normal, which isn't the same as mine. So
right.
If we can...
Points of view.
Right. Points of view and life experiences.
Yep.
Okay.
Tracking.
And yeah, okay. And then it's the empower. And that's where the stage you're talking about. That's that self-ownership. That's the hard work that we have to do so that I can't get triggered by other people. I know what is mine to own. I know what is my trigger point. And it's my responsibility to heal myself. And then if hopefully the world is loving and kind around me, and if they see me kind of falling, like there is the crisis center, they're like, come here. We will take care of you. You have to get yourself here. You have to show up. You have to make your appointments. But we will give you the tools and the resources that you need. And so having that self-accountability, I think, is really, really critical. And then I think I talk a lot about no finger pointing language. And finger pointing is anything that's you should have, why didn't you, I would have done it. That's based on your personal normal or expectation, right? You're a fighter. Well, that person's not. So no finger pointing language of shame, blame, and judgment. Some people, it takes a really long time to be able to even recognize it. I personally never identified as a victim. So therefore, when I heard these different things, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about my life, because I'm a warrior. I'm a fighter. I'm an optimist. It's going to get better. I can do this. Give me an obstacle and I will get up and over and around it. I don't call myself a victim. I don't call myself a survivor. I'm a thriver. Mm-hmm. Do I still have times that are extremely hard? You bet. Like you said about empty nest syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. But I've been through a lot, but I don't look at myself with that language. So I think explaining it in a way that letting people explain it in a way that's comfortable to them is one of the critical steps.
And let me, I think you're answering my question, but I'm kind of thinking of some of our listeners that might think, hey, I've got a bully of a peer, a bully of a boss. I feel like I'm getting knocked around. Woe is me. The world should be nicer. What? And I'm thinking more on the prevention side, rather than they need to get themselves to treatment. What do they need to do to stand up for themselves? I mean, what sort of responsibility do they have to say, hey, at the very outset, there's things you can do to make sure, that people treat you the way you want to be treated. Is that realistic expectation?
Yeah, I think that's a great expectation. I think people grow up to be what you expect of them. I think it's paraphrased like Eleanor Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. And I believe in that. I absolutely believe in that. And so I think for the person to know what their experience is, and then to know what's going to trigger them, and then to learn the skills of HBL and to learn the skills of how to respond like a paramedic or a police officer or a firefighter to a situation that's really intense and really scary, or just subtle, like your boss is just subtly always kind of being narcissistic to you and things like that, then versus react. Reacting is where it's a no-win solution, whereas responding is. And I think that's that personal responsibility of knowing what you're going to get triggered by, knowing how you're going to respond to it. Practicing HBL, healthy boundary lines, are just a communication skill set that we can all learn, applying them, and then recognizing if the person is blowing right by it. Then you have the opportunity to decide what to do with there. Then you're working on facts. You're not working on fear, like we were talking about before, like he's out to get me and she doesn't like me. We're working on facts. Like, on this day, I expressed this concern and you blew right by it. Then I expressed it again on this day and you blew right by it. And then you made fun of me in front of a staff meeting and said, what's your problem? You can't take a joke, right? So now you're working on facts. And then from there, you can decide who's in your circle of trust that you can go out and get reinforcements. The number one thing is don't be alone. In abusive situations, manipulative situations, they always try to make you feel alone. No one's going to believe you. Who would like you anyway? You're just an underdog. So then you go out and you find your team of people you trust, and maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's the HR director, maybe it's a coworker, and then you put together your plan.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
I am tracking.
What I find interesting is I was listening to this last set of questions and responses, was how similar this is to a lot of the executive coaching we do, where many times we're working with executives and leaders to tweak words. And it's just the change of a small word here and there can make such a powerful difference. Like I was working with someone recently and said, we need someone to just do this one thing. Don't do all the other things you're doing. We don't want you doing those. We want you to do this one thing. And that, when you phrase it that way, sounds like I'm taking a bunch of stuff away from you, and that says I don't trust you, and that was never the intent. And we said, if you just change it to, you're really good at this, you should focus on this. And that says, it sends a completely different message. And so these small changes in words are super powerful if they're negative, and they can actually be manipulative or perceived that way, or they can be super enlightening and uplifting. And I think that's really, really powerful message for all our listeners to take away today, is the impact of the words you use can be exceptionally powerful. And so the whole thing about shameful statements or blaming statements and finger pointing, I think was just really profound there. It begs me to just how you were dealing with this, is saying, you're a fighter, you're a warrior. I love that about you, your positive mentality. Yet a lot of times our response today, not our reaction, maybe it is our reaction in society, is let's create a safe space. So our safe spaces, and I'm willing to accept that I don't understand this, because there are a lot of things people have exposed me to that at first blanch I was like, that's an awful idea. And then, someone explains it to you and you're like, oh, that's actually pretty awesome. And so you're probably closer to this world of people who are dealing with, threatening environments or threatening situations or threatening relationships. Are safe spaces a cop-out, or are they actually a valuable thing? Or how should we be looking at this correctly?
Well, okay, I'm an optimist. We'll go back to that. I think every place should be a safe place, and I think every person should be empowered to make it safe. Everyone has the right to be healthy. Everyone has the right to healthy boundary lines. Everyone has the right to fulfilling their biggest ambitions. That's my goal, is I truly care about people, and I truly want people to live up to their highest potential, their biggest dreams, to go after what they want. So that's ideally what I really want. It's not like, it's a timeout corner and you're safe if you run over here, because then that gives people that I don't have the power to do it myself. And we go back to that self-accountable, self-reliant, right? It's my self-responsibility to take care of the situation. Now, I can't handle every situation, but I know I can go find a teammate, a partner, a buddy, a friend to support me. So ideally, I would like for people to look at what is really safe and unsafe. So a lot of times we talk about what's the intent. What's the intent of that person? So especially when I work on sexual harassment with organizations, I ask, what is the intent? Is the intent for that person using a stereotype? This is a true case of a C-level engineer who ended up getting fired for sexual harassment because he was told he had to integrate more on a personal level with his assistants, right? The people that reported to him. Well, he's great at the engineering part. He wasn't great at empathy and people skills and that language like you were using. Hey, here's what I would like you to do. You're really good at this, right? And that's not his skill set. And so he had too many complaints about it versus him being coached, and the company had to get rid of him because they couldn't take that risk liability of a lawsuit. And that's not safe for anybody. That's not safe for the engineer and the family he supports. That's not safe for the women who are now looking. In this case, that's what it happened to be. The women looking, what's the next guy going to be like? I've already experienced once. Like, you're looking for that fear. You're looking for the division. You're looking for the problem versus looking for how can we work together? Where is our commonality? What is the intent? He had no intention of being sexually harassing. He just really didn't have very good people skills. Mm-hmm. And then understanding that you have the power to be the positive difference that you want and to go outside of yourself, right? A firefighting team doesn't have one firefighter show up. There's a team. You don't have to be alone. And that is one of the premises of all of this, is that you're alone. People won't believe you. You have to fight it by yourself. There's no fight. I don't want hurt people who've had trauma. I don't want them hurting other people. That's where I can forgive the people who've hurt me in the past because they've been through pain. They've been through hurt. And it's got to go somewhere. So it's either going to go internally or it's going to go externally. And there's no room for healing and everyone coming together and being a kinder, healthier, prosperous world if we're all pointing fingers at he did this, she did that. And I think if we can take the focus and put it back on the intent of creating positive, kind, respectful, trusting relationships, I think we'll be a whole lot better off.
Yeah, this is fascinating. And it's dovetails with so many other discussions we've had with so many other guests. I think the one thing that's a little bit uniquely stated here, and I think it's really relevant in all these situations, is the very important distinction between reacting and responding. I really like that. And sometimes I think as a society today, we're doing a lot of reacting instead of responding. But reacting is, would you say it's more like emotional and responding is more rational?
So the way I describe it when we have more time is that reaction is when your fight, flight, or freeze kicks in. So I have two kids. One kid, growing up as a child, the reaction was to fight, get mad, that kind of thing. And the other one was to be sad. So we can get hijacked very, very quickly. And then that's when we react, and it doesn't serve the person well. It doesn't serve anybody around them well, right? It doesn't mean we don't express we're upset, we're angry, we're mad, we're hurt, we're disappointed. That is not okay. You cannot treat me that way. It's just not reacting in a way that's escalating the situation and creating more trauma within yourself with this fight, flight, and freeze. And we're all living on such a level of anxiety, and that's that division is this high state of anxiety that is not healthy for us emotionally, physically, and any of the levels. So that's why I really feel like if we can respond, know what your triggers are, know what your wounds are, know what language to use with one another. It just takes an extra thought of being able to do it, but you still express yourself. You're still firm, kind, and direct.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm thinking, I'm kind of wondering, Jim, if you and I are having a little bit of a mind melt and thinking about where humor might play in here appropriately and at certain times inappropriately.
Humor's wonderful.
Yeah. And that was a different show. But so you're talking about your kids and you've raised two kids who've chosen to serve our country through service. And as we both know, the onboarding process for the military can be rough, abusive, feel abusive. How did you prepare your kids for that eventuality? And are there lessons in what you learned that might tie to leaders preparing their teams for adversity and change?
Love it. Love the question. Absolutely. Leaders, military, parents. I think there's a reason why this conversation is kind of tying into a lot of other areas that you've talked about before, because we're all kind of looking for how to be happy, how to be healthy. And the onboarding process is, I love the military. I have absolute respect So I don't mean it in any disrespect when I say it's brutal. It's brutal to the kids. It's brutal to the parents. And it's so well done from an outside perspective, from my personal perspective, because in 3 months, both my kids are Marines. And in 3 months, they do more of self-analysis and self-rebuilding and self-confidence in 3 months than most people do in 3 years or 30 years or more. And what they learn about their inner strengths, their physical strength, their mental strengths, their need that they have to rely on one another, that they have to work together with people they don't like, people they don't understand, people who have different quote unquote normals, different expectations. They change the language so that they can all communicate across the board in a way that everybody can understand one another. And how I prepared them, it was funny because I didn't know I was preparing 2 kids to become Marines. But when I read the drill instructor's creed, I realized this is exactly how I raised my kids. And the creed that every single drill instructor has to take, and the Marines sit and watch them take this, is these recruits are entrusted to my care. I will train them to the best of my ability. I will develop them into smartly disciplined, physically fit, basically trained Marines through thoroughly indoctrinated in love for the Corps and country. I will demand of them and demonstrate on my own example the highest standards of personal conduct, morality, and professional skill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that's how I raised them. And if they didn't clean the toilet well enough, they had to drop and give me 10 push-ups, clean their toilet, and then go clean mine.
So, my creed as a parent was really short. It was, suck it up, buttercup.
So yes, the Marines have a sentence that is embrace the suck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe that's across the board.
Well, here's the other one is when it's really sucking, you say, I wish it would suck more. It's like when it's snowing, you're like, yeah, I wish the wind would start blowing. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Now I wish it would mix sleet and hail so I could get pounded in the face. Yeah.
So I call that flip a dip, where you take a negative and you turn it into a positive. So that was another way I prepared my kids, was every time they yell at you and tell you how awful you are or you can't ever do it, you flip it and you think of them yelling at you. You are wonderful. You can do this all day long. You kind of flip it. You play those mind games. And that's how I force myself, even in some really, really challenging times, to be an optimist. Is I kind of find the lesson in the pain. I find how I can help other people through my own hurt. And then before I know it, I'm smiling and I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to get up there and go back out there in this world and do more, do it better.
Yep.
Yeah. This has just been a really enlightening, uplifting, lovely conversation. And I know one of the challenges that you and I share, I think you're dyslexic as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, we both overcame that challenge in different ways, I'm sure. But that's just one of these common themes too. It's just come up a number of times in the show, which I find interesting. And with that challenge, what I'd like for you to say is, what is it that you would challenge in the spirit of learning something from this episode that you challenge our listeners to do, to say, here's something you can take away that's meaningful to all the things you care about that you're trying to help the world with? What's a challenge you can pose on our listeners?
Love it. All right. So I'm going to tie it into your dyslexic comment. How you self-think, pay attention to those deeply buried thoughts. When you start feeling that reaction of in your gut, you're going to cry, you're going to get mad, your hands are sweating, or you're getting ready to punch something. There is a lie that is attached to that, because if it's making you feel fearful, it's a lie. If it's making you feel encouraged and you can do this and you can go out, then that's probably closer to the truth. So monitor those deeply held limiting statements you have in your head, and monitor and not allow other people to add more negative self-talks or self-beliefs about yourself. So using dyslexia, I grew up being told that I was stupid and I was lazy. So guess what? I'm creative, I'm problem solver, I'm super, super hardworking to the point of ridiculousness, right? And I have to force myself to have fun, and I have to remind myself, oh yeah. And I had to fight thinking I was stupid and dumb and I'm not making a difference and all of those things, right? I had to fight that all the time. I still find I have to fight that every now and then, even though I know in college they found out my freshman year math teacher was like, you're dyslexic. She sat with me. She took the time. She was like, you're at every class. You're such a good person. How do you bomb? I'm like, because I'm stupid. Take my son, who is severely dyslexic. And I told him from the time he was born, you are brilliant. You've got this great brain. You're so much farther ahead of us. Give me time. I will find a solution. I will get you a tutor. I will get you into a different school. I'll get you into a reading program. We'll use computers to aid your eyes and eye tracking. You're brilliant. You're brilliant. You're brilliant. And guess what? He really struggled for a long time. And then all of a sudden one day he believed it. And he graduated high school with A in honors chemistry and A in physics and A in math. And now he's doing this stuff that I can't even believe what they're training him on, that because he believed it. So focus, and the challenge is, and I'm sorry I'm being long-winded, focus on what you say to yourself subconsciously and what you allow people to say about you, even if they're quote unquote joking.
Love it. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, Abigail, thank you for being on the show. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. And to our audience, in case you can't tell, Jim and I had a blast. And if you want to really have a great reference to this, make sure you sign up as a subscriber at theleadershippodcast.com, and then you'll get the show notes. And then you know what to do is go out on iTunes and give us a great rating. And if you didn't like the show, go to another podcast and give them a rating. So anyway, and remember, the greater the power, the more dangerous the abuse. Edmund Burke.
Thanks for listening to the Leadership Podcast. To listen to more shows or to access the books and content discussed on this show, be sure to visit theleadershippodcast.com. The material in this podcast is copyright by Rofty Advisors Incorporated and Self-Reliant Leadership, LLC, and must have written approval before commercial application.